There it is. Okay, everybody, welcome to yet another Nova Scribes. I'm Brian. It's nice to have you here. If you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to hit subscribe. Tonight, we've got another in our series of process talks, practitioner process talks, where we invite a luminary from our field to come in and walk us through how they do what they do from start to finish. Tonight, we've got Emily Mills. Emily Mills is an illustrator and a principal of Flavor Graphics, a studio specializing in event graphic recording, visual facilitation, and strategy illustration. She is the author of The Art of Visual Note-Taking, which is a bestseller, over 20,000 copies sold in English and in German. You'll have to tell us if you speak German. I didn't know if you did that or not. That's pretty cool. She's an expert in sketchnoting and visual storytelling. Emily has been helping to capture complex ideas with drawings ever since 2015. She also created the Sketch Academy, which you should check out if you haven't done so already. It is an online learning platform with thousands of students online worldwide, and she's taught visual thinking to a range of audiences in Fortune 500 companies and creative communities. And I hear she's based out of Bend, Oregon these days. So, Emily, it's great to have you. What have you got for us tonight?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm going to go ahead and just share some slides. I know they're not the most exciting thing, but I feel like it just kind of helps us all look at the same time. We're all visual people. I like looking at stuff while talking and looking at that rather than a talking head. So here's a couple recent pieces like in the last month or two, and I do a
Oh,
lot of work virtually, digitally these days. I started out doing analog in person, flying all over the country doing conferences. And now that I don't live in a central location anymore, I'm in kind of a remote area of Oregon. I don't really do as many in-person events, but I still enjoy logging in virtually. So these are my most common gigs, I would say. And then I have a couple of analog things from the last couple of years as well. I don't have like a particular niche within graphic recording. I pretty much accept whoever wants to pay me. So it's not, I only do housing or healthcare. There's definitely topics that I personally enjoy, but it's everything from private companies to finance to healthcare to public good and community enforcement, just really good topics all over the board, which is great for me because I really love learning and it kind of scratches that itch of always wanting to learn and find something fresh. Um, just to talk about discovery process, Brian and Chris and I did a Nova Scribe series on DTR, defining the client relationship. So I want to encourage you to go watch that because if you're really interested in the discovery process of just the beginning of talking to a client before you even sign a contract and then just right after you sign a contract, that's the best workshop. It's over an hour long, I think. And that's probably going to be better use of our time to mention this and then kind of move on because we've already talked about it. But basically, the discovery process that I do is you set expectations, understand the scope of the work, timeline. Sometimes I ask about budget, sometimes I don't. It just kind of depends on if they've told me or if it's someone I've worked with before or not. And just figuring out those like early details to get the client a quote. And then on that first client call, just talking about logistics, I like to show clients a template and get that approved before we actually do any other work because I want to set that visual expectation with the client, especially because I do a lot of digital work these days. Surprise and delight is really great for the audience, but not for the customer. So that template kind of helps people understand what it is they're getting before they actually just show up to an event. And then we talk about the prep work on that first client call and like the tech rehearsal is a huge deal. I have a couple stories with that. The first one is my nightmare moment, and it's the most embarrassing story that I've ever had working professionally. And I'm telling you so that you don't have to repeat my mistake. The context, a tech startup client with their own proprietary Zoom software, basically. They reinvented Zoom and they were having all these events to showcase their product. The problem was I had to plug in, my iPad and then like face camera for our meetings, and we always had to use their tool. So I never knew which camera was on until we were live. And I kind of brought this up with them like, hey, it's kind of awkward. I never know which camera is going to be first. Is it going to be my iPad? Is it going to be my face? Not really sure. Your tool doesn't allow for this. But most of the time it wasn't an issue. But then it was. We had a giant surprise and delight moment where they had this hybrid event in New York City where they had some people in person and some people tuning in remotely. And I'd been visual note taking during this event. And then they were going to do a big reveal. And instead of the graphic recording being revealed, the camera that was live was my face. And I was not beautiful that day. And I had a green screen behind me. And it was like, all these people in New York City are looking at me right now. And they're like, we have something special for you. It's just like, who is this random? So, really horrifying. And that's why you do a tech rehearsal and you make sure that you understand how to use the tool, whether it's Zoom or another proprietary platform, because I hope you never have to have that moment where you want to die inside, like I did. The second tech rehearsal story is hacks are red flags. So I don't know about you, maybe you've had a client where they're just kind of like slopping this event together. They don't really have a producer. They don't have someone who's even planned an event before. It's just they're throwing this thing together and you're the one who's going to make it look great. And I think whenever you start getting that impression, that could be a good red flag of you might need to have that conversation of, I think you might need to hire a tech producer. I think you might need to have a point person. The story here is I had a client it was like a youth conference, and they're like, well, I was remoting in, but the conference itself was in person. And so they're like, we're just going to put the laptop on stage. And that way you can just listen through the laptop mic and it'll be great. And so we did a tech rehearsal to their credit, but doing a tech rehearsal in an empty room without the sound properly working and doing a tech rehearsal with hundreds of people in the room, understanding that the sound is different, didn't go great, but we made it through. And then the last one, shifting the blame. I once had a remote client, kind of the same situation where they didn't have an event producer. They didn't have someone who was familiar with the technology of running an online event. And my graphic recording sample was coming through really blurry on their end. And on my end, it was like really crystal clear. I've been doing these events for quite a while. I understand how Zoom works. So I was able to tell them, this is a Zoom issue and you have to upgrade your account. If you've ever talked to Muddy Schlegel, he
Yep.
is a guru on this. And I gave them Muddy's number because I had reached out and I was like, can you please help these people? Are you available for consulting? Just something. And the client chose to blame me instead. But then I was very insistent that it was not my fault. And this is one of those times where you just have to defend yourself and hope for the best. And if they just fire you on the spot, then so be it. So I held my ground and they finally were able to find a more tech person on their team. And it was their fault. It was a Zoom issue. And the event went through great. And my graphic recording was nice and crisp because they were able to figure that out. But that's why you do a tech rehearsal, because the client doesn't always know what they're doing, and it helps you understand what their barriers might be. Not that it's your job to help them figure it out, but it kind of is. Like if you're there to be the visual representation of their content, the best thing you can do is help them understand how to make it look good. You don't have to be a tech guru yourself, but at least know tech gurus like Muddy.
Speaking of which, Emily, if I may, a trick that I learned from Muddy is if you find yourself in that situation where you're doing a digital remote graphic recording and the quality is low, uh, invest in getting an Amazon show, okay? Like an Amazon Echo. If you get the show version, the one that's got a little screen. I don't have one, but they look a lot like this, okay? If you dial into Zoom with one of those things, there it is. No, well, it's the same thing
That's
that
a
I.
Stream Deck.
Yeah, it's a little thing. It looks like that, but it's close to it. Anyway, if you get an Amazon Echo Show, it will automatically boost the video quality, and that's the thing that I learned from Muddy.
Yeah,
He's a good guy to
great
get to
tip.
know. Thank you for saying that.
One thing I want to talk about with digital
Mhm.
workflow is Adobe Fresco. So I'm going to switch my camera real quick because I have the little buttons that Brian was just talking about. I don't know if you want to pin that for everybody or how that works.
How's that?
Okay. Fresco, from what I gather, most people use Procreate, and no shade, but I think you need to switch to Fresco. And here are the reasons why. The first is that it has vector brushes, which are amazing. You have pixel brushes, you have live brushes, which I would rather call watercolor brushes. They're brushes that behave like analog media and vector. So I work pretty much 95% in vector. I will do some things with pixel, which we'll talk about. But the reason I use vector is because I have clients that scale things in crazy ways. And I don't always know that the client is going to scale something to be 15 feet. And they don't always know that they're going to scale this up to be 15 feet. And so if you work in vector, everyone wins. They can scale it up. It doesn't really matter. And everyone can get their graphics to display in a bunch of different ways. I'm going to share a different screen real quick. Sorry, we're going back and forth a lot. Okay, so this was my example. Clayton Homes, they're based in Tennessee. We did this enterprise level strategy map and we probably went through 20 variations and we finally landed on something that they were happy enough to print. And I didn't realize that they were going to blow this up and put it in their office. And if you go to their offices, you see this when you first walk into the building. You see it in their cafeteria and you see it on every TV screen in every single conference room, which is like really flattering. They're like, wow, my stuff is everywhere and everyone's looking at it all day, but it's also kind of scary. But you just never know how the client's going to wrap their arms around it and embrace it. And this is like a 10-year vision map for them. So for all I know, this is going to be hanging up in their office for the next 10 years. So that's why I work in Vector, because you just never know how things are going to be shared and distributed. Just talking more about Fresco practically, I use a Zugu iPad case. Here's my little camera, but it's just kind of like a standard iPad case. It does have a Apple Pencil pocket on the back in addition to the magnet clip, which I really like. This case is, I think, 5 years old, and there's like virtually no wear and tear on it, which I think is amazing. So look those up if you're looking for a better iPad case than what you have. I don't use a screen paper-like filter of any kind. I know a lot of people do, but personally, I just never got used to one, so I never use it. Apple Pencil. And for digital camera switching, like I'm doing now between iPad and camera, this is a program called Ecamm, and I use the button deck called Elgato Stream Deck. I know that Brian uses OBS, and I think OBS can go pound sand. I've had so many bugs with it. It's a little less user friendly. There's a learning curve with OBS, but it can do some really great things. So if you're looking for like a video monitor system, OBS is great. Also check out Ecamm.
Thanks for the pounding sand. I appreciate that. How much was Ecamm, by the way?
I don't remember off the top of my head.
No, it
OBS is
wasn't.
free,
Oh yeah, right. OBS is free. Okay. Anyway, you were saying,
open
go ahead.
source. But yeah, if you have extra money and you don't want to have to worry about OBS learning curve, then you can pay to not have to worry about it.
Nice.
With like the first process in working, I do what I call a shitty first draft, and I actually didn't come up with that. It's a process that was coined by Anne Lamott in Bird by Bird. It's basically I show the client my thought process, like what I think I'm going to do before I actually do it in a really quick, sketchy way. And I know that can be kind of intimidating for some people because it's like, I don't want to show the client my thought process. It's really messy. They can't read my handwriting. What if they latch onto something that's not final? But I just find that showing them, I've never had a client not like the crappy, shitty first draft. They've always appreciated seeing the work that goes into creating something that looks really impossible for them to create on their own. So it's kind of like getting a pulse on it. Like, here's what I'm thinking. Here's the layout. For this example, it was a not a live piece. It was just something that I did, like a sketch notey, comic booky version for a book anniversary. And then I just do maybe like a third that's more final and get another pulse check on that. Like, hey, this is the direction we're headed. Is this good? Do you like this? And then I just keep continuing on. I usually have 3 or 4 scoped drafts in every project so that there's time for feedback and revisions. But at each revision process, they're only allowed to make certain kinds of revisions. So at the last revision process, they're not allowed to redesign everything. It's always like a narrowing of the funnel. And I do this for graphic recording clients as well. I had a webinar last week. This was the template that I showed the client. And then I did this crappy little, hey, here's where each person's stuff is going to be. Just because graphic recording can be visually overwhelming for some people. Sometimes it's like this path that you follow, and sometimes there's containers and quadrants. So just kind of visually showing this is how it's going to look, and the client just appreciates the extra visibility, knowing what they're going to get.
Emily, I want to pause on this for a second because I think you're getting at something that's really important. Can you go back to your slide 9 for me?
Yeah.
So just in looking at a lot of different kinds of graphic recording out there, one of the ones that one of the things that's always struck me about your work is that it just seems really, really clean and well organized with good use of negative space, and it's very legible. It doesn't look like you're looking at a bowl full of popcorn. It's not just like
That's
visually
good.
overwhelming. Yeah, because there's structure to it. And so, just in that second step there where you use the gray lines to block out, okay, here's where I'm thinking this content is going to go. Do you find that when you do that sort of pre-visualization of layout, that you have that structure to things? Is that where that comes from?
Yeah, I think one is layout. So figuring out what style of graphic recording this is going to be. And I think I would maybe simplify that into two. The first being like a path, and the second being contained in however many containers that is.
Mhm.
And I do both because both have different pros and cons. For this one, it was a panel with 3 speakers that had 10 minutes each. So it felt really good to just give them each equal time in the graphic recording. Um, I use Flow for things like lectures, things that are given by one person, like a story, just because it's usually start to finish versus this is a panel, we're sharing a whole bunch of ideas, but they're all related to one another.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah. And then within that structure, if I could go even more nerdy, I would say, let me just enlarge this real quick, get rid of those arrows. With this example, so we have one quadrant for each person and then one for Q&A. And I kind of, there is a flow of how I captured it. So I started up with teammates and then went over here and then left and then kind of ended up on the left-hand side. So like a backwards C shape for this one. For Melissa Wood, I started on the far left and then kind of worked my way to the right. And for Brandon, start in the top left, kind of flow my way to the top right. So there is a little bit of flow, but because this was a webinar basically just sharing ideas, I didn't do like a flow or dotted line because each idea blurb stands on its own. They don't need to be in sequence. So I just kind of left them to kind of float in their own little ponds. Um, Digital workflow. I I'm a little neurotic when it comes to my layers. I don't know how everybody else works, so it's kind of hard to say what's normal, but whatever works for you works, right? For me, when I'm working, every single thing is its own layer, and all layers are grouped, and groups are groups. So basically, what that looks like is with this example, this quadrant is a group. So you can see quadrant one, two, three, and four, and then one for the background. And then within this quadrant group, we have a grouping for this blurb of text. We have a grouping of layers for this blurb, and so on and so forth. And it just gets more granular. I don't do color and black and white outlines on the same layer. They're always separate because sometimes you change your mind or the client changes their mind. Like, oh, actually, green is more of an accent color, not a main color. Can you make those blue instead? And if you have ever worked in a program where you have color next to black, sometimes it just creates difficulty to recolor things and make changes, especially if it's pixel. If it's vector, it's really easy, but changing pixel work is really different. I have a couple of guiding principles for digital work. Always ask the client where they're going to use it. I used to always default to this 16:9 size because it works great in slides. It looks good on like LinkedIn, but I'm also finding that it's not really the default now. Sometimes people want to share these on Instagram and LinkedIn and Facebook and places that typically I haven't in the past. And so 16:9 isn't the default. And I've actually been doing a lot more vertical work. Like this, I would say, is my new normal, like this LinkedIn page size. And my my kind of operating principle is don't do anything that you can't print at high resolution. So basically no pixel work, unless you know that there's no risk. So sometimes the client will give me like a photo that they want instead of like a portrait, and I'm happy to add the photo in. But if there's any risk of them enlarging these or printing them at scale, I just say the photo's not going to work. We either need to cut it or it needs to be a portrait. So that way it can scale. Personally, I think constraints are your friend. I think the less distraction that you have as the graphic recorder, the better work you're able to do because you're not getting distracted with the design process. You're just capturing because kind of these last 2 points, like content is king, and it's just kind of hard to be an artist and a note taker at the same time. At least for me, I find that capturing the content first lends itself well to creating those images in the pauses and the side stories and making sure that I'm getting the right information instead of getting caught up on those drawings. And so I limit myself to usually one brush and just the brand colors so that it's less to work with. And kind of lastly, asking yourself, what can't I do on paper? So that's where graphic recording digitally is really interesting. There's things that you can't do on paper. Like you could do white on black paper, but it's not going to look great. The marker technology is not amazing just yet. It's getting close, but gradients, um, embedding videos or like interactive elements, like just asking that question, like, okay, I'm doing this digitally. Is there any boundary that I can push that just makes it a little different than paper? Because we have the possibility. The only two brushes I use is the vector round brush. Those are the settings that I have, and then the vector manga drawing pen. I just like the way they look. The manga pen has like a little bit of a point to it, and the vector round brush is pretty much just round 100%, no pressure, velocity. So those are my settings. I know a lot of people try and finesse their brushes to be comfortable for them. This is what works for me.
So just taking a look at the way you did the word money there, just let's take a look at the M, right? So the downstrokes are thicker. How did you do that? It says no pressure, no velocity. Is that a double stroke on the ascenders?
Yeah, let me switch to fresco and I'll just show you. So let's see, here's my vector round brush
Hmm.
and the settings. I can have this be a plain brush. I can add pressure dynamics, which means the harder I push the line changes. My pressure dynamics are probably a little different just because I'm using my finger and not the Apple Pencil.
Hmm.
Um, and then velocity dynamics. Let me just
I
switch the
never,
pen.
and I never quite figured out
Yeah,
what
there we go.
velocity does. Is it
It's
width?
like,
Okay, all right. Yeah, now that makes
so there's
sense.
pressure and velocity.
Pressure works. Okay, cool. You've got a question from Ace in chat. Do you also include accessibility checks into your workflow? So, for example, color contrast, text size, visibility spectrum.
I don't, I haven't, I think most clients know what they're getting because they've seen my work and I'm using their brand colors. So I'm never going to do like an orange on yellow just because you can't read it. So I try and do high contrast work, but at the same time, I'm not going to fight the client on their own colors. And yeah, I just haven't done a lot of homework on accessibility with graphic recordings, so I haven't implemented that into my workflow. But if you have resources to share, I'd love to see that.
I've got, since you asked, I just dropped a link in chat. This is something that you can use if you wanted to upload one of your graphics to see how it reads with different kinds of color blindness. Turns out that there's about 6 different kinds of color blindness, and they range in terms of, what works for others. Usually, I don't know about you, Emily, but I just say, all right, are there any accessibility needs that I need to keep in mind? Um, cool, thank you. Can we talk about some of your charts specifically?
Yeah,
All right, cool. I would love to talk about this one a little bit. First of all, just give us a little bit of context. What was happening here? What
yeah,
kind of
this
event?
was a pro bono graphic recording for just a local group that I'm a part of myself, Deschutes Women in Business.
Hmm?
And this was a panel discussion. And the way that I typically handle panels is I will do like this little color blob behind their initial. And if people have the same initials, I will write their name out. And I actually learned recently, I might have been on the last Nova Scribes process talk, um, that a lot of people don't capture the names because it's not necessarily important who said what. But I personally love knowing who said what. So that's why there's little T's and J's everywhere because it represents who said what. And I try and do little clusters per question. So that's how I formatted this one.
And I noticed that you went with kind of I don't know if you could call that kind of a peachy beige background, but then what was kind of blew me away is that even after you did that, with some of the call outs, you decided to fill them in white to really make them stand out a little bit more. Kind of talk through your decision making with regards to the color use.
Yeah, I just really love contrast. And I have really gotten into not using any white as a background if I can avoid it, just because you can use white more strategically as a highlighter to call attention to things that are interesting or just use it as like another color in your arsenal. So that was kind of the thought there. And I got the purple and the green from the event design, like emails and landing page. So I don't know that I would have picked that light green for a graphic recording myself, but it's like, well, I'm just going to try it, see what happens.
That's fascinating that you're calling it green. I would have said that that was a blue. Maybe I need to take that color blindness test myself.
Well,
That
there's
almost
like
looks
the
like a true
blurple
green.
and the green, yellow
All right, so that
line.
looks yellow to me. This is one of these like, black dress, white dress moments.
Yes.
That looks like kind of okay, yeah, Hermik is enjoying that particular one. You're talking about, hold on, let's do this properly. So this color right here, that you're
Yeah.
calling green,
Yep. It's
man,
like
that
a
reads as yellow
lime.
to me. That
I
that
mean,
totally
okay,
reads as yellow.
when I look
That's
at
wild.
my iPad, it
Yeah,
is in the yellow quadrant.
yeah,
So yeah,
okay. That's
it's
so
like a
wild.
light
Okay.
lime to me though. I don't know.
A light lime. And Rachel says a lime greeny yellow. Very helpful. Way to bridge
80s
that one.
limelight yellow, yes.
Rachel's our
Back me
mediator.
up,
Okay.
people.
And then I also noticed on this one that you drop the photos in of the speakers, and other times I've seen you draw portraits. So how do you make the choice whether or not to do photos or portraits?
Yeah, fun story there. One, there was no risk of it being blown up because I just was doing this of my own accord. And
Mhm.
two, I did this template on my iPad in the car before I went in because
While you were driving, that's some skill.
I was
That's
so
amazing.
busy. I was parked so busy that I got to the venue a little early because parking is really bad there. So I was like, I'm just going to go to the venue early and do the template in the car, like get my colors figured out and do the title. And then I went in after that. So,
So how much of your work would you say is digital versus on paper?
um, I would say maybe 80, 90% digital over paper,
This is a
which is a
paper one
shame
here.
because I really do love the paper foam board.
Okay. This is a paper one here, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So talk a little bit through your process on this one. So I assume you started with the title, and then
Yeah.
what
Started
kind of
with the
meeting?
title.
Mhm.
This is a summit for nonprofit leaders in Central Oregon. They were gathered by this organization down here, Better Together, just to talk about economic mobility across all the different nonprofits. So, what happened was myself and another facilitator were in one room, and we had, I think it was three, it might have been two groups come through, and we did the same like workshopping with them. So,
Mhm.
we asked them the same questions. So, I had three blank boards and I used about half of a board for each group
Yeah.
just to populate it. So this one's I would say like very popcorny because
Mhm.
the focus of this discussion was just to get down their feedback, their ideas, and less about flow and story.
Well, yeah, and I think in this context that works, right? Because the
Right.
title is "What is it about economic mobility that brought you here?" And so if this is a quick poll of the audience, then you would expect it to be kind of popcorny. But I think
Mm-hmm.
that the title and what you're trying to do that works because
Yeah.
you there wouldn't necessarily be a progression of ideas. These are just the thoughts as it occurs to people.
Yeah.
I'm go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say one thing about this example. I was like almost scared to share it because so much of what I value as a graphic recorder is like filling the page and not just filling it to fill its sake and just add stuff to make it look full, but
Mhm.
because it feels like I did my job well when I captured everything perfectly or like I got the sentiment in the room down. And for this particular board, it felt kind of empty to me, but it's because the discussion was pretty light. Like people just didn't have new things to say. There was a lot of consensus. So there might be one bullet point that says like financial stability on it, but that could have been like a 30-minute discussion and everyone was
Right.
just like harping on that one thing. So it's like just because the board feels empty doesn't mean that you did a bad job or that you weren't capturing enough. Like sometimes the discussion is already captured and you don't have to do anything more.
Right. No, I agree. Especially if you've got a group that, they're just rehashing the same topic again and again and again. They're repeating themselves. It's like, don't feel like you've got to write the same thing 50 times. They said it once, you've got it. Wait, I really like this one. I think that the use of, you said empty space, but I think negative space provides a little bit of rest, especially if you've got a content heavy chart like this one. I think it's really
Mm-hmm.
nice. It looks like, I'm guessing this one was done on foam board. Is that right? As opposed to paper? Okay, so
Yep. I
which
have
one do you
actually never
prefer?
worked on paper.
We'll fix that. We'll fix that.
Well,
Yeah.
except in your workshop, I worked on paper.
Oh, that's once. Okay. All right. And what you did it the one time, you're like, forget it. I'm never doing this again. I hate this stuff. How do you feel about paper versus foam board?
It's mostly just like a thing of ease. Like it's really easy to just like flip a board and then you can capture again versus like, oh, I gotta like take paper to a board. Like there's a little bit more of a process there. And sometimes I just want to flip and be done.
A little bit more. You're right. A little bit more. Okay. Can we look at another one? How
Yeah.
about this one?
Yeah. Same event, but this was the keynote.
Right.
So I was actually it was super dark and I was on the side of the stage and there was this bright purple
Yeah.
light right down on me. I think I actually did a reel about it on Instagram, but I took a picture of my marker bag because when you put purple light on colors, it distorts what color they are.
Yep.
And so I was like, I think that's green. Maybe it's blue. We'll find out when I get out of here. But that's kind of like, that's one good reason why you have a limited color palette, or you just really know your colors and your Neuland numbers well, because sometimes the lights are different colors.
That's I'm noticing you had a lot of bold moves on this chart. This was and you took some risks too, like for example, drawing silos. I think that that's something that can get misinterpreted if you draw it incorrectly, but I
Yeah,
think these silos work really well. So, and that's all we have to say about that. Now, the other thing that I like about this chart is that, I love your use, and I've seen this on your digitals too, of how you fill the negative space. So the clouds for containers, because you're kind of wrapping an abstract shape, a shape that doesn't really fit everything, and then you go back into the negative space with the hatching that's there. And again, I think that just provides some good directionality and flow to this thing. How long have you been doing that? What's behind that one? Do you just like it,
as long
or
as I can
where did that come
remember. Yeah, I think just I really love contrast, and anything that I can do to add contrast to my work and help it kind of go off the page is something that
from?
I'm just going to be drawn to. Digitally, I've actually stopped doing the gray cloud background as much. I've started doing what I would call like a leading blob. So instead of this dotted line kind of leading you, that would be a color weird cloud shape. I don't have a great example to share immediately, but using a background shape to guide instead of a surrounding shape to guide.
Yeah, I'm with you. As opposed to something that's behind it rather than containing it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. One of the things that I really like about your charts too is that there's consistency of style. So, for example, those blue brackets, right?
Yeah,
Um, I
we should
really,
talk
really.
about those.
All right, well, let's talk about those. So, tell me about the blue brackets.
If I have a weakness in live graphic recording, it's that I don't always do headlines very well. I really try and have good hierarchy in my handwriting, but sometimes I just really miss headlines. And one way to combat that is to create some kind of a container for each headline if it's all the same shape. So that's why there's giant blue back brackets around stuff.
Yeah, that is a very, very old graphic recorder trick. And I'm saying like we're going back to like the 70s and 80s with that. So actually in the book that first defined recording as a practice, it said that you could do this thing called promotion. And what promotion is that, somebody says something, you find out later that it's important. You grab a red marker and you draw a circle around it. They come back to it again. You grab a yellow marker, you put a star next to it. They talk about it again. You grab a black marker and you underline it, right? But whatever you have to do to bring that
That's
forward.
great.
Yeah,
I
so
did
that
not
you're
know
doing
that.
that, right? Yeah, it's called promotion. So you take a small idea, you make it a big idea by adding emphasis to it. And I think that where I've seen this is a personal preference, so take it for what it is. But I see a lot of charts out there where there is no consistency of style. So maybe there's a blue bracket here, an orange circle there, a green banner there, but there's just no consistency to it. And I find it a lot harder to read a chart like that. Like you said, you've got a real hierarchy to this thing because I don't know. And again, maybe this is just me, but I look for what is the big idea, there's the title. And then what are the next biggest ideas? And I would go to the brackets after that and then say, all right, well, everything else is sort of at that read level, right? So tell me a little bit about that hierarchy. How do you think about it as you're structuring a chart? What are you listening for? How do you know something's at a certain level of hierarchy?
Yeah, I teach this in my classes, and I call it, um, I think I call it visual listening, but you're using your eyes. So it's like, what are the slides saying? Does it say, is there hierarchy in the slides? And then you're listening for that auditory hierarchy? If there's three things I want you to get from this talk, or at the beginning they say there's five things we're going to discuss today, it's like, okay, now I know I'm looking up for five things. I'm never going to number them, but I'm looking up for five things. Um, in the moment, if there is no structure, I would say that's why I probably do struggle with putting the hierarchy in ahead of time, because I didn't hear it live. So then you
Mm.
go back with the color or the brackets, something to make it a little different visually.
I love it. Thank you. All right, let's talk about the thing that everybody wants to talk about. Let's talk about the chicken. Okay. So we've had a couple of comments in chat. Casey said, "Nice chicken." How did you draw that chicken? And here's what I mean by that. I think that there's kind of two basic ways to draw something. You can draw imaginatively, which is you've got kind of a picture of what this thing is in your head, and you just put pen to paper and go for it. Or you can draw from a reference. So maybe you pull something up on your phone, you're looking at something. Was your chicken, was that just out of Emily's head, or did you have a reference for that one? Oh, here we go.
Oh, I seldomly use references
I was hoping you were going to say that.
because
All right. Are you going to give us a little
like
drawing demo?
I will. Oh, that's way
Yeah.
too thick. Hold it. When I'm drawing, you think about what are the most recognizable parts of a chicken, and I would say like the beak, the crest, maybe the feathery booty.
Casey, put that in the chat. Feathery booty, please.
That was like a soft pitch. You don't swing at that one.
Oh,
Oh, it's gorgeous.
So,
It's
like
fun.
when you're thinking of drawing whatever thing that is, whether it's a chicken or a truck, or it's like, what are the defining features? What makes a chicken a chicken? And then you like really go hard on those defining features. And then the rest of it doesn't have to be perfect as long as it's recognizable.
yeah. Yeah, I love that. The other thing I love about your chicken, just as we're looking at it here, the thing that I love about your chicken is it's just got this one little dot for an eye, right? And I think
Oh
that
yeah.
the little dots for eyes, it just automatically makes things cute. You can do this with people, you can do this with chickens, you can do it with trash cans. You put like just a couple dots on it, and so it becomes a cute trash can, right? But I think that, I can't remember who I heard it from, and if I thought about it for a while, I think cuteness goes a long way, right? If you draw
Oh
something
yeah.
cute, it's way more acceptable and people will like it more, even if it's not that good of a drawing, if you intentionally try to make it cute, right? I've used cuteness to kind of hide my lack of artistic ability. And it tends to work pretty well. I'm wondering if, just taking a look at this picture, a lot of like little dot eyes, a lot of kind of funny expressions. So tell me about like cuteness. There you go. Yeah. Hi, I'm done. Let's take a look at your trash can. Yeah.
There's my little
See,
trash man.
he's
Dumpy.
adorable. So tell me a little bit about the idea, because I've seen this in your work, the idea of cuteness, the idea of kind of like whimsy, just kind of like a lightness, even if the topic is heavy, right? So tell me about
Yeah.
your decision about style.
I think that's kind of just who I am. I grew up drawing cartoons. I was a school cartoonist from eighth grade until I graduated college, and I did weekly cartoons the whole time. So I was constantly creating, and I love humor. I love Gary Larson from The Far Side, and I love Bill Watterson, Calvin and
Oh yeah.
Hobbes. I love comics. I love humor, and we're in a lot of boring meetings. And it's not that the content that they're talking about is bad, and boring doesn't mean bad. It just means it's uninteresting. Like I would say half the time graphic recorders are hired is because they know that and they're trying to make their meeting a little more engaging. So I think anything you can do to lighten the mood, to highlight those like side jokes that might not even relate to the content that they're talking about and including it anyway, like I can't tell you how many times I've drawn a little dinosaur that's got glasses and wrinkles, and he says, "We've always done it this way." Because so many of the meetings that I'm in have executive retreats, and they're like, "We can't just keep doing it the old way. The founder's dead. We got to move on."
Mhm.
And I just kind of go back to that, "We've always done it this way, dinosaur," because that's what's happening. They might not be saying it, but showing it is just kind of a lighthearted way to call attention to what's unsaid.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. And it's always there's always these things I think that, like a signature that you almost have. Like maybe it's your we've always done it this way dinosaur, right? Yeah, Hermika also says Far Side, Dilbert Comics, you mentioned Bill Watterson. By the way, here's next time you're on I won't say paper, but foam board. If you take a chisel tip marker and you draw with that, you get enough line variation. It looks a lot like the dip pen that Bill Watterson would draw Calvin and Hobbes with. I love drawing with that just for that one reason.
Yeah.
All right, let's do a couple more. Let's do a couple more. And folks, if you're out there in internet land, if you've got some questions for Emily, start thinking about them. But we've just got a couple more to take a look at. So this is another one that I think pulls in a lot of the same concepts that you were talking about. Kind of that consistent color use, the gray clouds. I mean, to me, this has got everything that you've been talking about. Can you kind of walk through this chart in
Yeah.
terms of the design vernacular that you use?
Yeah. Two quick things that I want to share. One was this was on those really slick foam boards. I know we've all gotten those once or twice, and it's like the ink just doesn't dry. So if you look at the blue headline right before by Brian's head, back up, yeah,
Get out
right
of the
there.
way.
You can tell that I didn't let the ink dry long enough, and it just totally ruined my headline. But this chart was, I believe, actually 2 hours on a 40 by 60 board. They really wanted that first session to be captured on one board. So it was a lot of content in a little tiny area. So I found myself writing really tiny to make sure that I could capture the interesting and relevant information. But it's also like a really sensitive topic, like de-escalating crazy people and understanding how to work with them and how to have empathy and how to just like feel safe yourself. And so I wanted to draw a lot of people instead of just like stick figures, like a person that you could relate to rather than an anonymous stick figure.
How did you come up with this particular color palette? It's very bright. No
Yeah,
reds, no
those,
purples, no pinks, no browns. Yeah.
I believe those were program colors because I almost always get the colors from a website, a program,
Hmm.
something like that.
Yeah, lovely.
But I do like working with bright colors and I like
Hmm.
doing warm and cool at the same time.
Yeah, the hierarchy is really, really clear on this one. And this is just a chart I kind of want to just sit back with and read through in detail. It's like there's just a lot of stuff that I'd like to, I'd like to hang on to these. The mnemonic
Mm,
device on this one is really, really strong. Thank you for sharing it. And then,
yeah.
as you had said that you're working a little bit more vertically. Now, is that because it's a little bit more works with social media better?
Hmm. Yep, that's it.
Okay, that works for you. So tell me about this one. This was a digital, right?
Yep. Just another workshop. And this one, I kind of did the flow and I didn't want to work on a white background. So I use these like background shapes as the guiding shape rather. It's a little bit of both. It's a little bit container and a little bit guiding.
Nice.
And yeah, I picked the colors from the event logo, the expert lab on the bottom left-hand corner.
Yeah,
I
these are
did
just
build
awesome.
on the three different shades of the teal just to get the lighter colors, but other than that, it's just doing the brand.
Hmm. I've told you this before. I'll tell you again. When I do graphic recording, it's often I'll have people's work that I admire there as a reference, right? And yours is certainly one of those. This is just a beautiful chart. I love what you did with the title, especially starting, and let's just talk about like the breakdown of this thing for a second. So starting here in the upper left-hand corner, that's usually where we start when we read. And then to me, this one just, flows downward. I would guess that this is like closer to some of the last things that were said, if I had to guess, but you tell me if I'm wrong there.
Yeah, it's just a giant U shape actually.
Oh, it goes like
So,
this, kind of?
yep.
Okay. Love it. Thank you. Yeah. Well, I think those are all the examples that you shared. Did I miss anything, Emily?
No, I think that's it. One thing actually that I do want to share, let me go back to sharing a screen.
Sure. Let me stop here. And again, if you've got any questions you want to ask, you can go into chat, you can go off mute.
Whoa.
There
I'd
you go.
love to talk about display.
Mhm.
I feel like so much of our discussions in the IFVP forum online and just at conferences, it's like, how are you showing your graphic recordings? Like, and all of our clients want to know too, like, how can I use this? It's not just in the room. What do we do with it after?
Right.
And honestly, I don't have an answer because every event is so friggin' different. It's like you just have to get there and figure it out. We all have like the go-tos, like the in this bottom right-hand corner, the three chart pyramid, or putting them up on a counter. This one was a fireside chat, so I put up the welcome chat from the day before behind the fireside just so it would appear in photos and kind of set the stage so that they could refer back to it in the fireside chat. I've definitely done the easels in the lobby or in the common area, or also by the bathrooms or in the lunch line is another thing I tell my clients. It's like, put these charts where people are going to see them and talk about them. If they're stuck in line for 30 minutes waiting to get food, like put the charts there. And this bottom left example I wanted to show because sometimes the display is ugly and it's out of your control. That was a 4-day gig, and we were in this penthouse suite, and it was all windows, and so there was nowhere to put them. You can't really hang anything if there's no wall, and there was just like all this gaudy furniture. There was a piano in there, so it's just like, let's just stick these in the side room on easels as best we can. And people did go through this little room and kind of look through everything. I wouldn't call it ideal, but it worked.
Mm. Can I share one thing on the topic of what do you do with these when they're done that I've been
Yeah.
getting amazing traction with? So a while back I printed up a few of these just as like just to show off, right? And what it is
Mm.
that this was a 4x8 chart, then scanned, reduced down, and then it just printed on the same foam board that you're drawing on, right? But just reduced. And so
Yeah,
I
it
had
looks
a couple
great.
of these. Well, thank you. And I had a couple of these as a, just to show off what you could do with it. What I've started to do is to mail these to my clients, whether they ask for them or not, especially if it's a 1 day, one chart thing. And, typically I get two reactions. They're like, did we ask for this? I'm like, no, you didn't ask for that. It's just something we do. And then they say, can we have like 30 more of these things? I say, sure, as long as you pay for it. Right? Because they like to give them to whoever the leaders, people who attended, speakers, that kind of thing. So getting
Yeah,
them
that's really
reprinted
smart.
small, yeah, it's I've had some pretty good luck with that one. I think you had some recommendations and resources. Did I get that right, Emily?
Um,
Last slide.
I don't, the last slide is just documentation where I just tell you to document everything. Like you are your own PR person. So take pictures of everything. Like that's why I'm able to show you like rooms with crappy design or display because sometimes you just need to tell people this might be the best option. And social media is how a lot of people discover you. Sometimes people are discovering you for the first time on social media. Like, do yourself a favor and just take a selfie of you working or get someone to take a photo of you. Um, I know sometimes when people are taking photos of the charts, I like to go behind them and take photos of them taking photos of it. Um,
Yes. Mm.
and then also, I've been known to do voice memos and just ask people like, "Oh, what do you think of these?" They don't necessarily know that I'm the artist, but I like fishing for compliments so that I can put them on my testimonials page or like
That's
form it
great.
into a narrative of why you should hire me to do this thing.
That's really great. Well, Emily, thank you so much for your time tonight. I dropped a couple of resources into chat. The first one, of course, is Emily's book. If you don't have a copy of this, we cannot be friends. You should be, I mean, look at mine. Mine's all like tabbed up and everything. I haven't read the Bible as much as I've read this thing. You really need to read this one. This is a good one.
Oh
The
dear.
other one is Emily's other Nova Scribes that she did, where she talked about it before around defining the relationship. And again, just a reminder, we are not charging for this. However, we are asking for donations. Every little bit helps us, helps the IFP, and we appreciate it. And Emily, thank you very much for your time. It was great having you here.
Yeah,
Yay.
thanks everyone for coming.